Hi, I'm Terrell Turner, the host of the Law and Finance Show. And today I have a great guest on because one of the things that is very, very impactful for building a profitable business is being able to build a community around what you do, what the problem your company solves. And so I brought on a expert community builder today. And I think you're definitely going to love the insight because I've already been benefiting from some of the great insights that she shared with me. So we wanted to bring her on the show to share with the community. So definitely stay tuned for the episode. So without further ado, let me bring on my guest, Elizabeth. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Terrell. I'm so excited to be here.
Absolutely. It is a pleasure. I will say I have been excited about this one, especially from like our first connection call. And then we actually did a strategy call because I realized myself community is a very necessary thing to really take the business to the next level. So I've been excited about having you on.
Yeah, I love talking about it. I could talk about it all day, and I do feel like in a lot of cases it's kind of overlooked because people are like, "Oh, what do I need a community for?" Or I don't even really need to think about that. It just happens naturally. A lot of people, it's not in their normal like day-to-day focus.
And to say that, and I'll say for everyone that is listening and that is watching, I will tell you, Elizabeth did not pay me to say any of the stuff that I am saying. Although it may sound very flattering and supportive of what she does, she did not pay me to say it. She is not sponsoring this episode, but it's one of those things that I've realized personally because I started my business full time in April of 2020, and one of the things that I leaned heavy into was creating content and doing interviews. And I would say since April of 2020, we've done like over 400 interviews. So I have literally sat down and talked with that many people. And one of the things that I looked at is it's like, you know what? After all that effort, we probably should have a much bigger community around what we do. Like there are people who keep an eye on what we do, but they don't really feel connected to where I'm like, you know what? It doesn't happen automatically.
Yeah, I mean, it really doesn't. It takes a little bit of effort. But first of all, that's really impressive that you've done that many interviews. I'm like, oh my gosh, that made me tired just hearing that. But good for you. And what an amazing way to be a community builder by shining the light on other people. And, of course, there are other steps that we can take. I was really impressed recently when I was on a podcast and their little like intake form, they were like, have you followed us and connected with us in all of the following places? So like I can see your little social icons down here, but actually holding those speakers accountable to like go connect, in each place. Like that's 400 people you've interviewed, that's 400 connections that you have made. So I think that's amazing that you've done that.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, we are this year in 2022, with your help and your insight and strategy, we are definitely getting better about being more strategic about building communities. And so I want to talk a little bit more about that. But before we do, can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, so my journey's kind of funny. I started off as a high school art teacher and field hockey coach, and then quit doing that to become a full time wedding photographer. I grew my wedding photography business to about six figures in less than 3 years, and then started teaching other photographers how to start their business. And that eventually led into helping other women start businesses. And I kind of fell into business coaching and wanted to kind of how can I make a career out of business coaching? And found out like, okay, I need a specialty. My specialty is in community and leadership. That was very obvious. But then people weren't waking up in the morning saying like, oh, I need to be better at community and leadership. Like it's just not a specific enough problem. So I was like, okay, what next? And I had, kind of naturally fallen into some community management roles, community management positions for 6 and 7 figure companies. And I was like, I can help other businesses with their Facebook groups and lean into these community and leadership skills and create a system and a process to do it my way. with those kind of core values at the forefront. And that's how I landed here, because people do wake up in the morning saying, my Facebook group isn't engaged. I'm not getting leads into my Facebook group. I'm not monetizing my Facebook group. Like, those are real headaches that people have. And once I figured out that I can solve those headaches, then everything kind of took off from there.
Nice, nice. I love it. I love it. I mean, it's very interesting to hear, so many people's background and just the way that they navigated that journey into solving a problem that other people have and just, building a phenomenal business around that. So, I mean, I think it's amazing what you've done. And there was something you said that really caught my attention. Like I said, first time we talked, when you talked about, with building community and leadership, like that wasn't something people just woke up, thinking about, or even went to sleep thinking about. You know, when you really kind of made that shift from that, was there kind of this emotional pull of like having to admit that, hey, this isn't something that's on the top of people's mind?
Yeah, it's definitely, what do they say? Like, the riches are in the niches, or like the more specific you get. And if you had asked me 3 years ago, like, hey, you're going to make it if you just focus on Facebook groups and building community that way, I would have said, like, no way. I don't want to be known as like the Facebook group person. Like, no. But what I kind of realized is I still get to teach all the community and leadership based things that I'm so incredibly passionate about, and helping people with, mindset and becoming the best version of themselves, because that's really what a community builder is. But in order to get those people to know, like, and trust me, like, I have to be able to speak to their headaches. So it just became like an easier way to solve a very quick problem using my methodologies. But no, that was not an easy decision to come to. And even now, when people are like, oh, she's great with Facebook groups, I'm like, yes, but not necessarily on like a technical level. Like, I know how to do all the stuff, but I'm not going to be like, here's how you do your Facebook analytics and do, like, that is not necessarily what I teach. It's more about like the way of being that you need to be as a leader to attract more people into your Facebook group. So yeah, it was not a pretty revelation, but I'm so glad that I took that step.
It's one of those things that I interviewed a couple of lawyers, and they were just talking about how for them, that challenge of getting over their ego of, like really identifying like your niche and what are you known for, to where it's like sometimes I feel like we have like this romantic idea of all these things we want to be known for, but the people who are actually willing to pay us are like, I don't care about any of that.
No, they just want us to solve their problem, which is like, what I had to realize. Like, I can help people get more engagement in their Facebook group. I can do that in my sleep. So that's what I need to be selling, but then I'm actually giving them so much more than that.
Nice, nice. So now when it came down to, starting a Facebook group, I mean, was that a couple of years ago when you started your first one?
So I've had many Facebook groups, and I've had many Facebook groups not go well, but I can look at them and know exactly what it was. It wasn't a group problem. It wasn't a them problem. It was a me problem, right? Um, but my newest group, the Community Builder, is only about 5 or 6 months old. So that one is fairly new, and that one is here to stay. I am loving it so much. And, one of the conversations I have all the time is like, do I rebrand an old group or start brand new? And I had that same struggle, but I'm so glad that I started brand new, because everyone in there has like raised their hand. It's like, I'm here because I want to learn about Facebook groups. So I'm really glad that I did that. Even if I don't have like the sexy vanity numbers, I have really great conversion, and that's what matters.
Nice, nice. I love it. I love it. And I'm curious, as you started, multiple groups, and over time, have you seen kind of just the dynamics of how people respond to groups on Facebook? Have you seen that change over time?
Yeah, so I really think that we used to be able to make a community group just for the sake of community, right? Like, hey, I like photography. Who else likes photography? Join my group. And you can still do that. But if your goal is to get leads and sales, you're going to be much more successful now versus 10 years ago if you
Hmm.
solve a specific problem. So it might be like, I help photographers master off-camera flash in this group, right? Because then you're pulling in people who have a very specific problem. So I do think it's definitely changed. It's definitely evolved. You have to have a little bit more urgency. You have to solve a more specific problem. Of course, we can still have community for the sake of community, but if your goal is to monetize and leads and sales, then solving a problem is what's going to get you there.
Mhm. Gotcha, gotcha. Okay. Because that's one of those things that some people I've talked to have asked about, like, you know, should I do a Facebook group? Should I do a LinkedIn group? Or, should I just constantly post content? And one of those things that I've told people, I was like, well, I can't necessarily tell you about the groups, but I can tell you what just constantly posting content leads you. And I was like, if your goal is to get people connected and for people to feel, I was like, I'm not necessarily sure that just posting content is going to get you there. And so,
Yeah.
and so when it comes down to community, do you find that, I guess people have some mental hurdles that they have to walk through, on the front end to really understand community and what that means?
Oh, 100%. And just hearing you say that, I'm like, yes, content is out and conversations are in. That's kind of like the way that I like to think about things, especially when it comes to Facebook groups or, LinkedIn groups. I'm in a few and I want to do that as an experiment now that you say that. But conversations are happening like this long form, here's 10 ways to solve your problem type posts that are great blog posts are not necessarily going to be what you want to be putting in Monday through Friday in your Facebook group. But one simple question, it might be like, what's one thing that, what is the one I just did? What's one thing you'll never do again? Right? Like
Mhm,
people just love answering one simple question. They don't have to think hard. It gives them an opportunity to be seen, heard, share something funny, whatever it might be. They don't want to think hard. So those one liners, those conversation starters are really going to be where the magic happens inside Facebook groups or communities, even on your Instagram platform. It doesn't matter over just like content, content, content.
mhm. Gotcha, gotcha. And then, I'm when I saw that question pop up, I was just like, this is such a good question because it lets you know what's on the mind of your people, like that open-ended question, like, what's one thing you would never do again?
Yeah.
And when I saw it, like, the first thing that came to mind for me was I was like, I will never eat pumpkin pie at a office potluck ever again. Um,
I know. I was like, I think I should ask more about what happened there.
so I'll tell you what happened was I was, the office, like it was like 11 or 12 years ago. I was fairly inexperienced with office potlucks. And so people brought in stuff or whatever, and there was a piece of pie. There was a pie there, and it was uncut. And so I was just like, oh, and I was hungry at the time, and I was just
Mhm.
like, oh, the pie looked good from the outside. And what I did not, I guess in my inexperience, I did not survey that everybody around this table has walked around that for a reason.
Nobody has
And
touched it.
and so I got a slice of the pie and I was like, okay, I mean, I was at least smart enough to take it back to my desk and try it. And when I tried the pie, I was like, it tastes like someone put cigarette ashes in it. And
Oh
I was just
no.
like, from that point on, I was just like, yeah, whenever anyone brings up like pumpkin pie, I'm like, I'm good. I'm good.
Oh
I'm
my
still,
gosh.
I still have the memory.
You'll never forget. Some of that stuff stays with us. Oh my goodness. But yeah, like I love hearing stories like that about people in my community. And I feel like any community leader is going to love hearing and learning about the people that are in their community. And that's what's so great about questions like that is you might get funny stories like this that will connect us on, over laughter, but you might get someone that says like, hey, I actually, yeah, I'm never writing a sales funnel again. And then that's an opportunity to be like, oh, I can help you, or hey, I can connect you with somebody else that can help you. And you can constantly be that leader of the group that's helping people connect with one another over problems that they might have.
That is so true because I was talking to my wife actually like maybe like 30 minutes ago, and she was telling me about, a friend that she had talked to, and she was like, the more she talks to people and kind of understand what they're trying to process through with their business, the more she realizes how to best be helpful because, both of us have a background in working in finance for like Fortune 500 companies and doing all these advanced analysis. But when you start talking to small business owners and even some medium businesses, like they don't need all the fancy stuff. They need some very basic things answered when it comes down to finance. And one of the things that I have been thinking about, like I said, since our conversation and us connecting, is how, in a community, it seems like you get to actually understand what's on the mind of the people in that community. Whereas from a content standpoint, they're just constantly hearing what's on my mind, which isn't really helping me build a deeper connection with them. Or let me say, it helps me build a deeper connection with very, very few people who may already agree with what I have to say, but it
Mhm.
doesn't help me get to know them. So as you've kind of, developed, your communities and, different people have come to you to learn how to build a community, what type of results or impact have they seen from working with you and taking your advice?
Yeah, and that's such a beautiful little thing that you just shared too, because, as I'm listening, I'm thinking about how vulnerable people feel about their finances. And when you ask questions rather than just give content, you get that opportunity to like hear their vulnerabilities and then help them in, a much more sincere and meaningful way and speak to, those insecurities or vulnerabilities that they may have. And if we're just constantly giving tips based on, our lens of the world, then we're not going to be speaking and meeting them where they're at per se. So that you just shared, I think is such a beautiful win and testimony of like, how can I be more of a community based leader than just somebody who gives content? And it really comes down to just listening and giving them opportunities to have the floor and speak about the things that make them scared or vulnerable so you can help.
Awesome, awesome. I love it. I love it. Now, for the people who join, like I said, your community on Facebook, what are some of the things that they can expect from joining that community and engaging with that community?
Oh my gosh. So we have so much fun in there, but and I'm constantly telling them like this is a place for you to come when it's Tuesday morning and you don't know what to do or say in your group, right? Like we all kind of have these Facebook groups or maybe we're about to start a Facebook group and we're like, "Oh, like nobody's engaging. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to talk about." Jump in the community builder, just copy what I'm doing, apply it to your own business, your own content. There's conversation starters in there. I set things up so that content does have longevity. So I'm sharing like quick action tips, like how to optimize your personal profile. I'm sharing things in real time, like, oh, I got a lead in another group. This is what I did, things like that. But for the most part, I'm like, just jump in there and get some ideas and then go back to your group and continue to serve and continue to lead. And, when you have questions, or I had a student once that had a poll and she's like, nobody answered my poll. And I could look at it in a split second and be like, this is why. And she went and changed it. And then boom, everybody was answering the poll. So these things that come so naturally, to me, it's really fun to get put in these situations and help people troubleshoot and help them go fix it and take it back. And we all have those superpowers, right? It's not like I'm the only one in the group with superpowers. We have people like you who have totally different superpowers. And I'm really excited about fostering a lot of the networking side of things too. But that's all it is just a Facebook group about Facebook groups.
I love it. I love it. And what I want to ask about, like, for the specific audience that watches, this show are going to be more of your lawyers and those that are leading a law firm, and one of the questions came up from, lawyers is, are communities something that can be a useful tool for a law firm?
Yeah, I mean, communities can be useful for anybody. And I actually am helping inside two different lawyer communities, and they can be a tougher crowd. I'm telling you. But I'm like, okay, that joke didn't land, but then sometimes they will. Sometimes they will. But I'm really learning a lot about lawyers, and they're really just human beings at the end of the day. I think we have to work a little harder to sometimes get them to show up and be vulnerable or ask for help. But there are people just like anybody else, and the more that we can humanize an experience for an attorney or for anybody else. And the more we can show our face and be human ourselves, the quicker we're going to be able to build that relationship. And that's probably where I have to push lawyers the most, is like, how can we, bring some of your sense of humor to the group? How can we share a little bit more about your family or your travels, or, all the amazing stuff that you're doing and sharing in your personal brand? We want to bring that energy in the community as well.
Nice, nice. I love it. I love it. So if people are loving, what you're doing in those community groups, what types of services do you tend to offer, I guess, outside of the groups or outside of the Facebook group itself? Are there other services you offer to help people really get strategies and a plan and managing their groups?
Yeah, so I kind of have, three different, I guess, like ways to work with me. And what you and I did is what I call my Facebook group in an hour strategy session. And that's for someone who may have a Facebook group, but they're not happy with the results, or who hasn't started their Facebook group yet. We can kind of build it from the ground up so that you leave with a set plan, which is exactly what you did. You did such a great job. So that is one of my offerings that does really well. People tend to see really great results just in an hour. And then I have the community management agency, which is what I'm doing for some of these law firms. I have like a real estate agent. I have a couple different groups where I'm actually in their community as a community manager, but I have a team that supports me as far as the data and things like that, so that it becomes a really easy lift for me to stay in my zone of genius and serve them really well. But also I send them a report every Friday, which I call the community scorecard. And that's all based on their goals. So usually it's leads, it's content ideas based on what the community is talking about. And then any analytics as far as like growth and the percent of active members, because, really great CEOs are going to be able to say things like, our engagement's down 10% this week. What do we need to do to get it back up? Right? Where the newer business owner is just going to be like, meh, nobody's answering my questions. So, so I'm always like, which one do you want to be? Do you want to be able to analyze the data so that you can move the needle? Or do you want to just be like, meh, nobody's answering? Right. And then the third thing I have is actually a course on community management called the Community Growth Lab. It's brand new. The doors will be opening for the second time in February. And that essentially is my scorecard method, my 5-step methodology to community management. And that's really great for a solopreneur that wants to DIY their community management, or someone who has a team and you're hiring a community manager and you want to kind of set it and forget it and not have to train them. The course will train them. So those
Nice.
are the three ways. And I feel like I'm always evolving and changing, but that's where we're at and it feels really good.
Awesome. Awesome. I love it. So where can people find you online?
So my website is just elizabethhenson.co. I love that you bring it up. That's so fun. And then I'm Elizabeth Henson on Instagram, elizabeth.henson. But if you guys want to learn about Facebook groups, it's super easy to find my community group. It's called the Community Builder on Facebook. So you can just search the Community Builder, or you can go to my website and find it there. And you can also get like free conversation starters. So I have a list of 25 conversation starters you can use in your group that will double your engagement in 2 weeks. Promise. I've seen it happen 100 times. And there's also ways to get screenshot worthy responses from your community members. So if you're seeing people that are sharing like all these amazing things happening in their community and you're like, I don't have any like moments like that. How do people get people to say such great things? I've got 5 different strategies to get people saying screenshot worthy things.
Nice, nice. I love it. I love it. Well, before we wrap up, one question that I love asking every guest that comes on. I mean, when you think about your field of or your zone of genius and you think about your experience, what's 2 pieces of advice that you would give to lawyers and law firms about building community?
Number one is definitely like to create an environment where people feel seen and feel heard. I think sometimes, like you and I talked about a few minutes ago, like we operate under this assumption that like what I have to say is important enough. When really building community has nothing to do with what we have to say and everything to do with listening to like what the community has to say. So that would be number one, is just how can you take this environment and create a space where people feel seen and heard. And the second one is to remember to like cast a vision every single week inside that community. we need to be reminding them why that community exists. So just like you said, what happens inside your group? Every Friday I go live and I remind them why I created this space, why the space is important, why they should continue to come every single week, right? And just remind them of that bigger vision of why you created a space for them. And that keeps them excited and keeps them engaged and keeps them coming back. But people forget. They're like, I started this group 2 years ago. And I'm like, oh, awesome. Like, when was the last time that you reminded people why you make the group? And they're like, oh, I haven't. Every single week, we need to get on that stage and remind them why we created that space for them.
Awesome. I love it. I love it. Well, Elizabeth, thank you so much for being an amazing guest on the show today.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been awesome working with you, and I know we have more exciting collaborations to come.
Absolutely. You just checked out the Law and Finance Show, where we bring you great, insightful interviews that talk about the business and the financial side of managing a law firm. So subscribe to the show and check out more of the great interviews.